Welcome to those who have joined the webinar. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just wait one more minute to let a few others drift in, and then we'll get started with our program today. Thank you for joining us. Okay, we'll get started. Welcome to our EV 101 event. My name is Rosemary Mascari, and I'm co-chair of the USGBC Long Island Sustainable Transportation Committee, and I chair the Education and Outreach Committee for the Drive Electric Long Island EV Coalition. Thank you to the town of East Hampton for hosting us today. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce Lauren Steinberg from the town to say a few words about the town of East Hampton's sustainability efforts. Lauren is a senior environmental analyst for the town of East Hampton's Department of Natural Resources. She began working for the town in 2018 and oversees its renewable energy and energy sustainability projects. Lauren works closely with the town's Energy Sustainability Committee to promote community-wide efforts to eliminate fossil fuels, reduce greenhouse gases, and advance renewable energy in East Hampton. Lauren?
Thank you, Rosemary. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to all that are joining us. The town of East Hampton has a long history of promoting energy sustainability. East Hampton is both a state-designated climate smart and clean energy community, and was the first municipality in New York to adopt a goal to meet the equivalent of 100% annual community-wide energy consumption, such as electricity, heating, and transportation with renewable energy sources by 2030. The town facilitated the development of the first megawatt scale solar farm on Long Island's South Fork and formed the Energize East Hampton Initiative, which is a coalition of programs that offer energy and money-saving opportunities to East Hampton residents, such as free home energy audits and discounts on solar panels. You can visit energizeeh.org for more information on that if you'd like. And as you'll hear more about today, the town is also focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, which is the state's largest source of emissions. So today's EV 101 webinar is the second in a three-part webinar series on sustainable transportation. This webinar series is a collaboration between the town of East Hampton, Transit Solutions, and the U.S. Green Building Council Long Island Sustainable Transportation Committee. The first webinar, which was held back in April, covered alternatives to single occupancy vehicle travel to, from, and around East Hampton, such as public transit and ride shares. Our next webinar, scheduled for June 16th at 4 p.m., will focus on active mobility, so ways to get around town and where you can go by biking or walking. Registration for the June webinar will be available starting tomorrow on energizeeh.org. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on energizeeh.org shortly, along with all the other webinars from this series. Back to you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Lauren. As I mentioned, I co-chair the USGBC Sustainable Transportation Committee, and the U.S. Green Building Council seeks to transform buildings, how buildings are designed, constructed, and operated through its LEED building rating system, which includes transportation to get to buildings. One of the efforts of that, our Sustainable Transportation Committee, was to form a Drive Electric Long Island EV Coalition several years ago. This coalition is a coalition of electric vehicle stakeholders on Long Island, including the USGBC-LI, dedicated to accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure on Long Island. For more information about electric vehicles, visit our website at www.driveelectriclongisland.org. And if you're interested in participating in the coalition, there's opportunities to sign up as volunteers, and we welcome that. And now for our program. So today's program will feature first an overview of electric vehicles, which will be presented by Nick Palumbo. And then we have a group of EV owners right here from East Hampton who will be available to answer your questions about what it's really like to own an EV. Nick is the Executive Director of Sustainability Programs at Suffolk County Community College. In that role, he works to bring environmental awareness to all aspects of the college's mission. Nick is a member of Drive Electric Long Island, as well as the sustainability community for the town of Southampton. I'm sorry, Sustainability Committee for the town of Southampton, and the USGBC Long Island Chapter Sustainable Transportation Committee. Nick's a former U.S. Navy officer and holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Villanova University and a master's degree from NYIT in energy management. And he's been driving hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and battery electric vehicles since 2002. So I will stop sharing my screen, let Nick take over. And I ask the other panelists to mute themselves so we don't have any background noise.
Thank you, Rosemary. Okay, am I up? You see that okay?
Yes, you're up.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'll jump right into this. So this is a presentation that I put together probably 5 or 6 years ago. I've updated it a number of times now. And initially, I created it to share at a lunch and learn seminar that we put on at the college for some of my colleagues in the hopes to persuade them to consider hybrids or electric vehicles in their own driving. And I think it's been pretty successful in that sense. We definitely see a real uptick in EVs on our campuses. And so we've I've rebranded it, and we're now shopping it around to various municipalities, and I think getting some good traction on it. So let me run right into it. We start with the why question, and there's a number of reasons why in my mind, and we'll kind of step through these. But the first and probably most important one is that I think we all need to begin to consider the way we've always operated in light of what we all now recognize as a problem with our climate, and in that it's changing, and the impact that we're having on it. And so transportation is a major contributor to that. And you know, the first step in dealing with the problem is recognizing that you have a problem. And I think automobiles are so pervasive in our daily living that sometimes we tend to forget about the impact that they have on our lives. And so this is a short video that some of you may remember. It was a television ad by Nissan, and I know you have some Nissan fans in the audience out there, so they'll appreciate this. But I really like it too, and I think it sort of sets a good mood for the discussion. So, I'll run this. Why is my link not working? There we go.
What if everything ran on gas? Then again. What if everything didn't? The 100% electric, zero gas Nissan Leaf. Innovation for the planet, innovation for all.
I still like that out a lot. Anyway, so yeah, like we said, environmental reasons are certainly high on my list of reasons to consider alternative fuel vehicles. And just as an example of that, well, take a look at this chart here, which shows the varying degrees of emissions for various categories of automobiles that you've seen on the road. I'm sure all of you have seen these badges affixed to the back of different cars, perhaps didn't know what they meant, but you can see there's a real range here. And all of these, I mean, we're starting at the left hand of the bar there with low emission vehicles. And you can see the difference between a low emission vehicle and a zero emission vehicle is significant. And then, you know, obviously continuing this scale to the left, there are other vehicles that are anything but low emissions. So our choices in the marketplace are significant. We have the ability as individuals in our purchasing decisions, particularly around automobiles, to make choices that are going to be less impactful on the environment. A second rationale in my mind for considering alternative fuel vehicles are the financial impacts. And I think here too is something that perhaps a lot of people don't recognize, is that there are significant advantages. So fuel costs obviously is one of those impacts, one of those financial impacts. The cost of gasoline is relatively low right now, but we've all seen in our lifetimes certainly that, you know, there various factors can cause major fluctuations in oil prices, and that translates to what you're paying per gallon at the pump. New York State has fantastic incentives for a lot of people who commute on the Long Island Expressway or drive on the expressway with the Clean Pass, which you can qualify for certain types of vehicles, which enables you to access that HOV lane regardless of how many people are in your car. And that's something that I like to take advantage of when I'm on the LIE. Save yourself a lot of time and money that way. Tax incentives, this chart I have to update on a fairly regular basis, and I think it probably needs to be updated again, but there are across the United States at the federal level and at the state level, there are different incentives, financial incentives. I was able to benefit with a couple of my vehicle purchases. I've owned 4, I think, alternative fuel vehicles in the last 10 or 15 years, and I was able to benefit from these incentives with a lot of those purchases. So this shows you what's happening at the national level. This is something that I think is very much in flux right now. I think the new Biden administration is encouraging or contemplating legislation which would enable additional tax credits for EV purchases. Right now it's capped for certain manufacturers. And New York State also has its own incentives as well. So you can look to benefit that way.
And that particular one, Nick, effective June 30th, that greater than 62,000 is going down to 42,000. So there are some changes, as Nick said.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
think
there's
to mention, if you have questions, if you can type them into the Q&A, and at the end of the presentation, when we have the Q&A section, we will read all of them. So if you think of questions as you go along, just type them into the Q&A. Sorry for the interruption.
Not at all. So energy security is something that sort of goes in line with, we talked about the fluctuation in fuel costs. Again, various geopolitical events often are related to energy security and the flow of oil from the Middle East. And I think anyone who's concerned about those implications should consider alternative fuel vehicles, which reduce our reliance on foreign imported petroleum. You can see here, 1/3 of our U.S. petroleum supply is imported, and 3/4 of that is related to transportation use. So there's another justification. This is one that I spend a little time on. This is, you know, something that I've come to realize over time really has a significant impact on my enjoyment and my cost of ownership. Now I've got a battery electric vehicle that I'm driving now, and there really is a difference in the maintenance requirements. I think some of our panelists will probably talk a bit about this later on, but I've certainly found that in my own life, and I can talk a little bit about the reason for that. So I have here ICVs, which is internal combustion vehicles. Traditional gasoline fueled vehicles have various components that you're probably all familiar with, listed here. And oftentimes these can be points of failure over the vehicle's lifetime, and can be costly to replace. And by contrast, full battery electric vehicles have none of those systems, and so therefore you're eliminating maintenance requirements and you're reducing failure points on those systems. And on the other side, you also have EVs inherently. Electric vehicles are designed in a way that they really reduce wear and tear on other components of the vehicle. So the brake systems on an electric vehicle are used much less intensely than in traditional fossil fueled vehicle, because they have what's called a regenerative braking system, which utilizes the the electric motor to slow the vehicle down. So what you're doing is you're using the kinetic energy of the rolling vehicle to reverse the flow of electrons across the generator, across the motor, and effectively using it to generate electricity. And so that in turn slows the car down. You still have traditional disc brakes on electric vehicles, but because of that regenerative braking property, you tend to utilize the brakes themselves a lot less. You can really, if you drive smartly, you can use the brakes very little, really only for emergency stopping situations in some cases. And therefore, the brake pad wear and the wear on the discs themselves is greatly reduced. And then the other thing that both hybrids and battery electric vehicles have is called idle stop, which means that when you're stopped at a red light or at a pedestrian crosswalk or a stop sign, rather than the engine continuing to run like it does in a traditional combustion vehicle, EVs and hybrid EVs will shut down, and basically you get this sort of quiet sensation, and it feels like the car is stalled, but what it's doing is it's shutting down, conserving energy during that time, and also reducing the wear and tear on the engine and other components. And lastly, one thing that appeals to a lot of people about electric vehicles is, depending on how they're designed and configured, they can have very high performance. This is a short clip. I'm going to just jump ahead. This is from the show Jay Leno's Garage, and he's getting a chance to test drive the new Tesla Roadster. And most of you probably know Jay's a big car aficionado, and his reaction here, I think, speaks to the performance capabilities of the Tesla Roadster.
The front performance, it's a driver's car. There's 3 motors in this car, 2 in the rear, 1 in the front. 10,000 meters of torque at the wheels.
What's your top speed?
The top speed is 250 plus.
Really?
It hurts the fluid in your eyeballs.
Yeah, it's almost like fighter plane. And 600 miles on a charge?
600 miles on a charge, 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. A quarter mile in 8.8 seconds.
8. That's just like drag race time.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's hilarious.
An 8.8-second quarter mile in production car is really amazing. How about a Roadster that goes even faster than that? But let's see how fast we can go without leaving Earth.
Ready to go for a little ride?
Oh, sure. What do I need to do?
So the only thing I would do, Jay, is put your head on the headrest.
Why would I need to put my head?
So the Tesla Roadster is designed for high performance specifically, but I think having driven a number of electric vehicles, there is a very different performance characteristic, responsiveness of an electric motor that you don't see in really other in other vehicles. And it's nice, but that's not everybody's cup of tea either. You know, not everybody likes to drive around at high speeds. And I think the other benefit of an electric vehicle, a fully electric vehicle, is you get that sort of quietude. The reduced engine noise and vibration really makes for a pleasant driving experience, which is pretty nice. So with all that being said, I think a lot of people would agree that electric vehicles are the future, and that for a number of reasons, we need to start thinking in that direction, making the transition. But I'd like to persuade you that, you know, this is the right time to consider it because, well, for a number of reasons. So really what we've been waiting for, the automotive industry has been waiting for, is for the technological innovation that's needed to make electric vehicles really a solution for a mass market. And a lot of that has to do with battery life. And I think we're really to the point now, certainly with a number of vehicles already on the market today, that battery life is really viable for most people's daily driving patterns. And then along with that, we're seeing much greater vehicle availability. A lot of the EV manufacturers, a lot of automotive manufacturers are ramping up their EV production to a level that begins to bring prices down. So you're seeing, you know, cost parity in many cases. And then along with that, you know, a concern that a lot of people have is about, you know, availability of charging, particularly on the road. And we're seeing tremendous development in that area as well. And also, as I mentioned, the new administration in Washington is really making a big push here. We're going to talk a little bit about charging further on in the presentation, so I won't dwell on that. Personally, I think this is less of an issue than people anticipate it will be when they're contemplating an EV purchase. My own experience has shown that I rarely need to charge outside of my home or workplace. But it is a concern, and you know, in certain situations, you kind of need that infrastructure in place, and I think we've reached the point where it is available at that level. We talked a little bit about the cost of fossil fuel, low now, but relatively low now, but that changes all the time. It's volatile, and there are market implications there. And then, of course, the environmental cost. Something that comes up a lot when I talk about electric vehicles, people will say, well, electricity is only as, or your EV is only as clean as the electricity that you're plugging into it. And that's true, but I think, you know, certainly, you know, here on the East End, I live in Southampton. I'm envious at the efforts that the town of East Hampton is putting forward in terms of 100% renewable energy supply for your communities. I think Southampton is aspiring to do the same. And, you know, as we make that shift with our electrical supply, then obviously that means that, you know, our daily driving is impacts on the environment is that much less. And so this graphic here is just a quick comparison of the annual fuel cost, both in terms of dollars and of the environmental impact in terms of CO2 output. And you can see here, as you go down or as you go up from the bottom, you know, there's a nice drop off at both levels. The plug-in hybrid benefits in the reduction in fuel and also reduction in emissions. One thing that you don't get, as I talked about with the hybrid, is the reduced mechanical complexity, in that you have two power plants, and you know, there is that the maintenance cost and the equipment reliability concern with a hybrid. I see hybrids as being a transitional technology that's going to get us to electric vehicles, get people comfortable with it. I mean, that was my own experience. I owned a hybrid back in 2002. I purchased one of the early Prius hybrids, and then at a certain point, Toyota announced the plug-in Prius hybrid, and I thought, okay, well, let's try that out. And I really like the all-electric driving experience. And so, you know, when I felt like the marketplace was ready for me to move into the battery electric vehicle, I made that leap, and I really haven't regretted that ever since. I really think that for many people, battery electric is here. The time is here. And then this is a graphic that Rosemary, I think, borrowed from NYSERDA. Our friends at NYSERDA developed this, Rosemary, and it shows you the number of electric vehicles on the road across the state. And you can see Long Island and Suffolk County in particular, down there in the dark green, is well ahead of the rest of the state in terms of electric vehicle adoption. I think a lot of you have probably seen this in your daily outings, that there's a lot of Teslas and other EVs on the road out here these days, which is great. And you can see on the chart below just the increase here over the last several years of that. It's really starting to curve up nicely. And you also see the shift here in 2020 when battery electric vehicles, actually that happened earlier, right? So 2019 looks like we made the shift where full battery electric vehicles are starting to predominate, and the hybrids are reduced as a percentage of the alternative fuel market. So quite a few of them out there today, and projections are, I think, going to continue in that direction. And here's just a breakdown by vehicle name. Tesla Model 3, I think we have another owner on our panel today to talk about the Model 3. And then we also have some Nissan Leaf owners here. We're going to talk about their driving experience. So this next part here is just talking about the history of electric vehicles. I think maybe a lot of people don't realize that electric vehicles have been around since the beginning of the automotive age. That this is a very early, I think, Model T that was powered by battery. Unfortunately, you know, at that time, and the batteries just didn't have the type of lifespan that we have today. These were old wet cell lead acid batteries, I assume, back then. They just didn't have sufficient range or power at the time. And so the internal combustion engine sort of became the automotive standard. But, you know, throughout the 1900s, there were a number of different models. Henry Ford here with an electric Ford. This is looks like a Japanese ambulance or a vehicle of some type, powered by electricity in the 40s. In the 1990s, GM put out the EV1. Some of you may have seen the documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car? Well, spoiler alert, it was GM. They killed their own car, bought them all back off lease and crushed them. I think they were perhaps concerned that it was going to eat up market share of some of their other product lines. And into the 2000s, Toyota made the push with the Prius. It was really the first, you know, big market hybrid vehicle. The green one up at the top is a car that I owned back in 2002. And then the one down below was a plug-in version, an updated Prius that came out around 2010. Those sold very well, especially when gas was expensive. And it sort of set the stage for what we're seeing today in the marketplace, which is, you know, and along with the advances in battery technology, increased range with the new battery chemistries using lithium ions that are kind of borrowing from the electronics industry, cell phones and laptop computers and such, you know, putting that same technology to work in an automobile, and is finding, I think, good success in market adoption. We have couple of Teslas here on the left. This is a Nissan Leaf up at the top, I believe. Tesla Model Y. Another Toyota Prius Prime is their new latest version here. BMW's got a couple of electric vehicles on the market right now. Chevy's coming back into the game. I think they just continued the Volt, but they're still selling the Bolt, which is their full battery electric vehicle. This is a Honda Clarity down here, which is their hybrid offering. And a bunch of manufacturers have now announced or bringing to market other types of vehicles, including pickups. That's a real hot category in the US. So Rivian's coming out with an electric pickup. I think they're starting deliveries on those pretty soon. There's the Tesla Roadster again. Tesla's also making a long haul freight platform. There's Tesla Semi. This I think is the Volvo Polestar. VW is making a big investment in electric vehicles. I think they've committed to going all electric following their Dieselgate scandal. They've kind of rebranded themselves as being environmentally friendly. They've got the ID3 and ID4, I think, for sale now. Rivian also is working with Amazon to get a lot of electric delivery vans on the road, which is great because they're everywhere now. Tesla Cybertruck is, I think, beginning production this year and hopefully will be out by the end of the year. A lot of people are looking forward to that. Ford has put out an electrified version of their Mustang, which a lot of people love. This is the Volvo down here. Oh, this one up at the top, I think, is Lucid. Lucid is a high-end luxury vehicle that's now on the market as well. And moving on, I just put this up here. This is kind of a data-rich spreadsheet that shows, I think, all of the EVs on the market today and various price points and range capacities and such. So a lot to absorb there, but it's just an indication of what's out there now and how much diversity there is in the EV market today, and I think we can continue to see that develop, and that'll bring more people into the market. And then, as promised, wanted to just talk a little bit about charging, because this is, like I said, a source of concern and confusion for a lot of people. So basically, electric vehicle charging comes in 3 flavors. We talk about level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 at the left is basically your standard household current. I'm talking about 110, 120 volt current, household AC current. And you can plug just about any electric vehicle into a standard wall outlet like that. And you can charge it. It'll go really slowly, painfully slowly, but you can do it. I would say that's sort of an option of last resort. That's not really ideal for most people's use just because of how long or how slow the charging is. So you can see down here at the bottom, it's cut off a little bit, but you get about 5 miles of driving range per hour of charge, which is not great. But what you can also do, what most people can do in a residential environment is level 2 charging. So if you have the right type of plug, a 240 volt outlet accessible, you can plug into that and charge your car at home. That's what I do, and it works very well. I had to have an electrician come and install an outlet adjacent to my driveway. I don't have a garage. But once that was done, it wasn't all that expensive. And what it means is I can charge at level 2 with 240 volt current, and I get about 25 miles of charging range per hour of charge. And that's pretty good. That means that, if I'm charging for 8 hours, I can basically replenish my battery from just about any state. And so what I do is, at the end of the day, when I'm done driving and I'm going to bed or coming in for the night, I plug in, and in the morning I've got a full battery. And then the last option here, the level 3, they call it DC fast charge, is direct current. You're charging from a direct current power supply at 480 volts. And with that, you can charge really quickly. So you can see here at the bottom, you can add about 60 to 100 miles of range in 20 minutes of charging. So these DC fast chargers are what you see along the interstates, out on the highways when you're traveling. A lot of rest areas have them now. If you're looking for them, you'll see them there because they're pretty prevalent on the highway. And also, as Lauren's going to talk about in a minute, a lot of municipalities are now installing this type of infrastructure for their communities and for people who are traveling through their communities. And so that's a great option if you're on a road trip, you're away from home, and you need to stop and get a charge and continue on. It's really rapid charging. Usually they're set up and linked to a system that allows for you to make payment for that charging as you're traveling. So that's the different charging levels. This is just a quick sort of fun graphic that shows you the different types of plugs that you may see on different types of vehicles, electric vehicles. It looks a little intimidating, but it's not really anything you have to worry about. I mean, much like we all have cell phones, and over time, you know, the different charging adapters have changed. That's kind of where the EV market is at the moment. There are a variety of competing standards, which as yet there's not agreement on, but you can usually work around this pretty easily with an adapter, just like you would with a cell phone. If you have a phone, you can find a way to charge it on just about any electrical outlet. So not something to really worry about there. And this is just a quick chart that shows you charging time and charging cost based on number of miles that you drive on a daily basis. So you can kind of just plug in your own daily drive on the left there and scan across and figure out how much it's going to cost you in electricity to charge that up versus how much you'd be paying in gasoline for that same amount of travel. And then you can also see how much time you're going to spend charging based on which level you're charging at. So like I said, I feel like realistically the level 2 charger is what you want to have. I don't think I would encourage anyone to buy a battery electric vehicle if they didn't have access to level 2 charging equivalent. And I'll let the other panelists talk about that and their experience when we get to the panel discussion. And that brings us up to the Town of East Hampton's portion of the program. And we'll bring Lauren back out to talk about what the town is doing related to EVs. And it's great stuff, by the way. Like I said, I live in Southampton. I travel to East Hampton and out to Montauk occasionally, and it's great. If you're an EV driver, lots of places to charge up, nice places to charge up. So Lauren, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So yeah, the town of East Hampton is doing its part in helping to encourage the use of electric vehicles by creating a network of publicly available EV charging stations at multiple locations around the town. The town has installed 6 level 2 EV charging stations in the parking lot for Town Hall and 4 level 2 EV charging stations in the Amagansett Village parking lot. As Nick mentioned, the level 2 stations can provide 20 to 60 miles of range per hour charge, depending on the vehicle. These charging stations are available for use by all members of the public 24/7. There is a small fee to charge your vehicle at these stations of $2.50 for the first 3 hours and $1 per hour after. And to use the charging stations at Town Hall and Amagansett, just simply download the EV Connect app on your smartphone, scan the QR code on the station, plug in and start charging, and all payment is taken care of in the app. So it's very easy. In addition, at the end of 2020, through a partnership with the town, Tesla, and Electrify America, the installation of 12 DC fast chargers was completed in the municipal parking lot on South Euclid Avenue in Montauk, across from the post office. These stations can provide a much faster charge for many vehicles, almost to full charge from empty in under an hour. And these stations are optimally located right downtown in Montauk, so residents and visitors who are dining or shopping locally can plug in their EV and recharge quickly while they do so. The Tesla stations are compatible with only Tesla vehicles, and the universal stations provided by Electrify America are equipped with both CCS and CHAdeMO charging ports and are compatible with most EV models. All charging stations in that lot are available to the public also 24/7. The Tesla stations take payment remotely. Coming up, we have some Tesla drivers speaking who may be able to talk about that process a little more in detail. And the Electrify America stations offer payment options through their smartphone app or via credit or debit card directly at the station. The charging stations that the town installed are available for use by the public, but the town also installed these stations to use with its electric vehicles in its fleet as well. The town began reducing emissions impacts from its municipal fleet years ago by adding hybrid vehicles. And in 2017, the town purchased 3 plug-in electric hybrid Chevy Bolts. And in 2019, with assistance from a grant from the New York State Clean Energy Communities Program, the town purchased 4 fully electric Nissan Leafs. These vehicles run completely on battery and produce 0 tailpipe emissions. The Department of Natural Resources that I work for has one of these vehicles, and we love it. We use it almost daily to travel to field inspections and meetings. We've had other departments who ask about it and want to test drive it, and when they do, they're very pleasantly surprised by the pickup and the smooth ride that these vehicles have, and we don't have to worry about oil changes or any of the other maintenance required with gasoline vehicles. So overall, it's been a great experience, and we're very happy with knowing that whenever we do drive these vehicles, we aren't burning gasoline and contributing to climate change and air pollution through tailpipe emissions. And to ensure that the town continues its efforts to electrify the municipal fleet, the town board passed also at the end of 2020 a fleet efficiency policy that calls for the purchase of electric vehicles for the town fleet to the greatest extent possible. And this year we're going to be adding more electric and plug-in electric hybrid vehicles to our municipal fleet. And if you want to learn more about the town's electric fleet and see a map of the publicly available charging station locations throughout the town, you can visit the town's website, enter ehamptonny.gov. The energy sustainability page has all that information, or you could always contact me at Department of Natural Resources if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And with that, we're gonna open up the Q&A, and we have several East Hampton town residents here to share their experience with electric vehicles and answer your questions, and I'll contribute as well.
Okay, I'm going to call on each of our EV owners to give a little brief overview of why they chose to go electric, what car that they drive, and what their experience has been. So we'll start with Paul Munoz.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Paul Munoz, and I live in Springs. I have been an EV owner for the past 5 months now, and I gotta say I love my Model Y. I drive a Tesla Model Y, and I've always wanted to be an EV owner, and the right time came last year when my lease was up, and my only resort for transportation was my work vehicle, which was a pickup truck, and 12 miles per gallon driving to the city or anywhere else was not something I wanted to do. So I had been invested in Tesla for a while now, and last year was just the right time to go ahead and do that. And I chose a Tesla because of the simplicity and the efficiency and just their network. I think we went into the no maintenance from an electric vehicle. I think that's across the board for everybody. Low maintenance, just tires, and I haven't even put in windshield wiper fluid yet, but that's about it. The Tesla also, what I love is the self-driving and the autopilot. It helps a lot when you're commuting, if you're stuck in traffic. Driving by myself in the carpool lane at any time, I don't have to worry about, the restrictions there. And just the fact that it's just brought joy back to driving, because I rarely have to use my brake because of the regenerative braking system. So you're less tired from the foot pedal action. And the car is just smart in, I put something in the navigation and it'll tell me if I can make the round trip. And if I can't, it'll tell me where I need to stop to charge. And that allows me to, stop, take a break, eat something. Most places are strategically placed where it's around food, other local businesses. So you're supporting local businesses every time you stop, basically. So overall, I think that's a big win. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them later. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Lena, tell us about your experience. Lena Savori.
Mute, Lena.
Yeah, so I bought mine last June. I fell in love with it immediately. I had never bought a new car in my entire life. I had only had used cars. I bought my last used Mercedes in 2005. It was a 2004. I paid $11,000 for it, and I drove it until 2020 when I bought my Tesla. A lot of people said to me, how could you possibly buy a new car, Lena, when you've never bought anything but a used car in your life? And I said, well, in my case, I was lucky enough to have bought some Tesla stock years ago, and the Tesla stock was so valuable to me that it ended up paying for my car. I recognize that not everybody's going to have such a good opportunity as I did. I just have to say that I'm in love with this car. So I bought it for economic reasons. I love it for emotional reasons. It apparently understands everything I want, and it anticipates my every need. I've never had a car like that. It's a great deal to do with the regenerative braking, but it also just has to do with the fact that once you're on the road, you can set your speed. And then from that point forward, it will just attain that speed or slow down if it needs to in a turn, whether there's traffic, and then it'll speed up again. So it just seems to understand me incredibly well. And I almost never had a love affair that did quite as well as that. So I was particularly excited about it. I love the range. I've got a 340-mile range. It's set to 80% of that because the battery is most effective if you don't use it up to the top or down to the bottom all the time. But I can easily get in and out of the city, even if I'm driving too fast, where it uses a few more miles than if I'm sticking to the speed limit. Whenever I stop at a fast charging station, and I've gotten enormous numbers of fast charging miles, because one of the beauties is that every time you recommend the Tesla to a friend, and they let the dealer know when they buy the Tesla that you made the recommendation, you end up with another 1,000 free charging miles, which I just seem never to run out of. And partly it has to do with COVID, and, I'm not driving across country. So that makes life simpler for me. But whenever I do stop, the first time I stopped was on my way back from Up Island when I had just bought the car. I stopped in Southampton, which has a spectacular set of Tesla superchargers. And I sat there and I played with the toy box. I mean, I never had a car that had a toy box before. And I got to tell you, there's more fabulous stuff in that toy box than you can possibly imagine. I mean, my kids play karaoke all the time because it's got karaoke in every conceivable kind of musical genre that they just, find ridiculously fun. And I can play chess with myself. And I don't know, there's just a million. The car somehow has been designed to be your best friend. And I've just never had a car like that. I also find it incredibly comfortable. So when I'm not using the fast charger and I'm just at home, I just plug it into my outdoor outlet, which is a 120. So, Nick put in a 240 because he wanted to have a little more speed. I frankly never care because, when I'm home, I can plug it in at 9 o'clock at night. I'm not going to be out again, maybe until the following afternoon, by which time, even at 5 miles an hour at my 120, I'm fine. I've had absolutely no maintenance and no cost. So I've spent not one dime on this car since June last year. I don't even take it to a washing outlet. I just let the rain wash it, and it seems to be gleaming all the time. I cannot tell you how divine this car is. And there's no complex moving parts in this car except for two, I think. So there's no maintenance that I can anticipate. I did not get the $7,500 federal rebate because Tesla had sold its 200,000 cars by then. So unless Biden changes that, which I doubt that it's going to do for Tesla, I suspect that Biden is going to support, the big car manufacturers whose unions he is eager to have supporting him. But maybe I'm wrong. That would be lovely if that happened. We have Tesla charging stations. There are probably more Tesla was because they were out in the open so big at the beginning, and they recognized right from the beginning that range anxiety was going to be the main thing that was going to keep people from buying cars. They put Tesla charging stations in bulk in the parts of the country that they were targeting first, and that was California. So I would venture to guess that 1/3 of their charging stations are there. But, just within 30 miles of my house, I have a half a dozen superchargers and or level 2 chargers here. So I don't know. All I can tell you is, and by the way, if I were going to resell my car tomorrow, I just looked before this webinar to see what the resale prices were on Model 3s. And I could sell my car tomorrow for practically what I bought it for. It's wild. So all I can say is, not to mention, of course, that it's electric. So I was the chair of the East Hampton Sustainability Committee last year when I bought this car. I put in heat pumps that same summer. I did a number of things that I just thought I needed to do to really experience for myself what these decisions felt like for individuals, whether it was in terms of electrifying my house or whether it was in terms of electrifying the car. I felt that it was difficult to tell anyone else what I thought they ought to do if I hadn't done it myself and gained the benefits of it. I suspect that I will not. Well, we'll see, of course, as years pass. I never had a new car before, so I certainly don't plan to give this one up soon. I'm in love. What can I tell you?
Wow, Lena, that was a great sales pitch. We need to get you on the Drive Electric Coalition.
Oh, I'm telling you, I'm so mad for this. Mad for it. And by the way, I'm 76 years old, Nick. So everybody else I know of my age says, oh, I can't deal with that computer screen. And I said, are you kidding me? That computer screen is like, it's so intuitive. It's easier for me to use that car practically than to use my normal car. In fact, well, anyway, I won't go on anymore, but that's.
Lena, I'll interrupt you now and give Scott and Francesca a chance to rave about their cars as well.
Yes, exactly.
Scott, you're up next. Scott Bluehorn.
Yes, well, I also love my Nissan. I I decided for the Nissan instead of the Tesla, although the Tesla sounds great too, because I wanted a little bit more room, and the Nissan has more room for. I do a lot of carrying of things, and it's got a fair amount of room. But I really love it. I got the Nissan Plus, so I don't get 340 miles, but I get to. In weather like this and with driving, at the speed limit, I'll get 248 miles of range, which is a lot more than what, it's, the EPA says it's 219, but 219 is about the worst I'll get. So 248 is common. I love the pickup. It has all those other kinds of automatic driving assist that Lena was talking about, but my decision really came because I got solar energy for my roof. I put solar panels on the roof, and I thought, well, let me start integrating my system here. Let me take advantage of this. So I pay $15 a month to the electric company, to PSEG, which is basically the grid hookup charge. And I have not, I produce so much solar energy, more than I use, that charging up my car at home, which was what I almost always do, has not seen any bump in my electric bill. It's still the $15 a month. So it's basically free fueling for my car. And I took advantage of a PSEG LI rebate and had a charger, a L2 charger, put into my garage. I had given a picture of that, but it's not here. It's so convenient. It's not an outlet. It's actually a charger. So it's got a plug, and I go and I plug it into my L2 charging. The Nissan has a supercharger outlet, and it has a, or whatever you call, receptacle, and it has an L2 one. And and that gets me, a full charge in about 8 hours. So it's basically been incredibly economical. I also don't have any, maintenance costs. I've had the car now since September 2019. And, the main issue for me is we do need more chargers. Tesla has more chargers than the CHAdeMO chargers, which is what Nissan uses. And I also find that often the chargers, not all the chargers are working. I'm always, the company has it's not Nissan, but the EVgo and Electrify America, you can call them up and they can tell you if a charger is working or not. I recently took a long trip, and and it was pretty decent. I went up to Vermont and back from here, stopping in New York City on 4 charges, and I had plenty left over by the time I got here. But we do need more charging stations. That's an issue for me. But I'll never go back. I mean, I will never go back to a gas car. Every time I used to fill up my gasoline car, and I got great mileage on it, 40 miles to the gallon, it still just didn't feel good because I could smell the pollution I was putting into the air. And now, it just feels like I'm running off of I'm running off of clean power, and it's free. So this is the wave of the future, and I'm so glad that I got in on it when I did. My son, I want to say, has a Nissan Leaf, not the Plus. So it's like 150-mile range, and he's an Uber driver, and he loves his car, and he loves the fact that he can stop and hang out, for 45 minutes between driving customers and relax and read a book, and then he gets back in. So, even with less range, people love their electric vehicles.
Thank you, Francesca. I love the fact that you've got solar and you're charging for free.
Yeah.
Scott, tell us your story. Scott, are you on mute?
Hi.
There you go.
Yeah, so I too have a Nissan Leaf, a 2016, and I have always wanted an EV car, a fully electric car, really since they became more available. And essentially, I was looking for kind of an around the town car that wasn't going to be taking on a long trip. It's something that is just like a daily driver, which everyone has if you're driving. And so my fiance's car was kind of old, and we were looking to replace that. And I shopped around, and I started looking at Carvana, which is this service that does actually just deliver a car to you to test drive and then buy if you like it. And this is the first car I selected, and that was primarily because of price. And what I'm going to talk about is the fact that this Leaf is it doesn't get anywhere near as much mileage as a Tesla or some of the higher end models. I get about 100 miles on a good day, but it costs a third of the price. So this is a car that almost anyone who drives a car can afford. And it's used, but mine had about 18,000 miles on it. So really low miles, really low cost. It was just a little bit over 10,000. So I really liked the car, and it was delivered to me, which was really nice. And I immediately liked the change, how quiet it is, how fast, how responsive, and the fact that I can just charge it overnight and it gets me where I want to go. I actually had the upgrade of has a slightly better charger built in from the 3.3 watts to the 6.6, so I can use fast charge, and I would recommend that. And that's also because I don't own a house, so I can't put in a level 2 charger. So I'm just off 120 volts. So I'm as bare bones as an EV owner can get, really. But I've had zero problems. Again, for anything around town, I never run out of charge. And if I get close, there are enough chargers around town that I can comfortably get, enough range to get anywhere else I need. And then the electric bill also has, it's not really noticeable when you're plugging in either. So again, for me, it was really all about the price and the fact that this is like the most accessible car. A lot of these have come off their lease, so they're 5-year leases from 2016, 2017. So they're incredibly affordable. I think almost like one of the cheapest I saw. So I'm advocating these for anyone who says, "Oh, I love the EV, but I can't afford a Tesla or any of the other high-end models." Like, these are really affordable and within range. So I just love it for that reason.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
You've each provided some great perspectives. I don't see too many questions. There was one from earlier, Nick, that John Cullen, one of our attendants, said you mentioned you purchased 4 vehicles in 8 years, but he was asking why you were switching so frequently, as he usually buys a car and holds it a minimum of 8 years.
Yeah, I think my timeline might have been off there a little bit. I think I've purchased my first Toyota Prius back in 2002, and I probably had that about 8 years. And then I traded up to the Prius plug-in. I was driving a lot in those days. I lived in Southampton. I was working in Stony Brook, so I was driving about 150 miles a day, and the mileage added up quickly. So that's why. And I'm trying to think. Did I have 4 cars over that period? I think I went from the Prius plug-in to the Tesla Model 3. So this was 3 over, probably 15-year span there.
Yeah, that sounds more normal.
Yeah. I do drive a fair amount, so.
Well, we don't have any other questions in the Q&A, but why don't the panelists, you've heard a lot of information from each other, maybe you can pick up and ask each other some questions.
I have a question for Nick, and that is on kind of the issue with charging stations. I have seen, for example, was it NYSERDA, or it was possibly, I think it was the New York Conservation Voters thing. They had a list of charging stations, and it sounded very long and big, but many of those charging stations weren't actually working. For example, a lot of Nissan dealerships have a charging station, but when you try to use it, they don't know how to use it, they don't open it up, they don't let you have it. The other issue is it seems that there aren't enough charging stations. You may find that there's 1 or 2. So if there's 1 car, then you're already then waiting for longer. And the third thing is, why don't we start putting charging stations in gasoline, in gas stations? So I just wanted to ask about the perspective for charging station, and what is, the organization doing to help push that forward, and to get resources out to drivers that really work. And I get the Tesla folks may not need this, but there are a lot of other brands out there.
Yeah, you're right. You know, and when I make this presentation, I try to make it generic. I am a Tesla owner, you know, but I try to keep the presentation itself related to EVs across the spectrum. You know, different makes and models. But my own, you know, driving perspective obviously is shaped by my own experience. And you know, as a Tesla driver, I think it's less of an issue because Tesla does have a very extensive supercharger network. And you know, all of the locations are basically real time on the display in the car, so I can see, you know, as I think Lena mentioned, when you're on a trip, the car will tell you when to stop, you know, when you're going to need to stop. It'll tell you how many charging stations are available, you know, how many of those are not functioning or otherwise occupied. So the car has that intelligence built in. And you're right. I mean, I have used other types of charging stations other than the Tesla chargers, superchargers, but you know, I think they're you know, not as perhaps closely integrated into the vehicle operation. You know, you have to know, you know, what networks exist. I don't know that there are really great. I mean, there are different tools out there that will tell you. I think Google Maps now has a feature that'll tell you, you know, where electric vehicle chargers are on your route. So that's a tool you can look at. But you know, the reliability of that information, I think, you know, it may be a little bit questionable. I think that's something, you know, that's one of the things that the Long Island Drive Electric Coalition is trying to do is, you know, get some traction both on the driver side and on the infrastructure side. You know, we're doing outreach to municipalities to make them aware of the incentives that exist from the state and the federal government to put new infrastructure in. I think the town of East Hampton is doing a great job. They're a good example. You know, it's important that the locations, the charging locations, be strategic where they're located. I think Paul mentioned, you know, oftentimes Tesla superchargers are in a location where you can stop and use restroom or get something to eat, get a cup of coffee. You know, so where they're placed is important. I think your point about, you know, EV charging going into gas stations, that's probably where we're headed. You know, I think it just makes sense because gas stations obviously are strategically located. They're in places, you know, along highways where people are going to need to get gas. And I think that's where EV infrastructure belongs too. And you're seeing that. You see it certainly on the major interstates when I'm driving, you know, out of state or upstate. You know, you'll see now a lot of the rest areas, almost all of the rest areas have, you know, some EV charging capacity, and those that don't will soon. You know, so, but yeah, I think, you know, depending on the vehicle that you drive and, you know, how you drive, that's maybe more of a concern for some people. But I think the majority of people are probably going to charge at home. And that's the point that I'm making. Certainly in my life, you know, it's an important consideration when you're taking a long trip, but on a daily driving basis, I mean, most people, I think, if you can charge at home, that's the best way to do it.
And
We have a EV infrastructure committee. It's headed by Ron Goulmy, and that committee is focused on just these issues. We have issues in terms of multi-unit locations. Most of Long Island is a single family, but in multi-unit locations, there are issues we've been trying to escalate. There's also workplace charging programs that we encourage businesses to put charging stations at the workplace, as well as there's funding through the Department of Environmental Conservation for municipalities to put charging, which we're encouraging as well. So we recognize that's an issue. The data that we've looked at in comparison of Long Island to New York State shows that we have more EVs per type 2 station and DC fast charge. We're trying to use that data to emphasize that we need more infrastructure on Long Island as well.
I just want to point out, you know, most people do charge at home. So the real issue is the long distance driving when you have to take a trip.
Right.
And I would really encourage municipalities to put in superchargers, because at this point, you know, if they're just putting in the L2 chargers, then they're, you know, that's great for people who work in town. but that's not really great for people who are coming through town or visiting town who really may need the supercharge, a fast charger. So, not everybody has a Tesla. So,
Yeah, some of the barriers in the past have also been the what's called the make ready costs, which is not the charger itself, but the conduits, the upgrade to the panels and that stuff. And there's a program that the utilities have just come out with. PSEGs will be expanding theirs for the new year, which help cover a substantial portion of those costs. So that'll help as well. I see another question in the chat from Patricia Curry asking how you can test drive a Tesla. I live in Manhasset and I was able to test drive it at the showroom, but maybe, I guess out there you don't have too many Tesla stations. So how did you guys test drive your, and I see that Lena is offering hers up to test drive, but Nick and Paul and Lena, how did you test drive your Teslas before you?
Yeah, I did exactly what I'm offering to do. I drove somebody else's Tesla. I could have gone to Manhasset also, and that's in fact where I picked up my car, Rosemary, to start with. But that's 2 hours away from here just to test drive. So I was pretty sure I wanted it. And I had a friend who had one. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, and I think most Tesla owners and probably other EV owners would be happy to do that because, we love our cars. We're passionate about, the positive benefits that they can bring to the environment and are happy to do that. Tesla is unusual. We didn't really talk about this, but they have a different model. They don't have dealerships. They have showrooms. They sell cars directly to consumers. I think the first time I drove a Tesla, they had a pop-up showroom out here one summer in Southampton, and they had it in a shipping container. They had a bunch of cars there and you could go and test drive them, and that's how I did it. But I've also shown my car off to a lot of people and let them drive a lot of people. And like Lena said, Tesla incentivizes that a little bit in that you can give someone your incentive and you can benefit from that if they buy the car. So it's kind of a nice model.
Also a bill that's under consideration by the state to expand the number of manufacturer showrooms. It's limited to 5 right now for the state and just Tesla, and they're trying to change that law because New York State was very much around dealership relationships. So if that passes, you might see more showrooms.
One of the challenges I think that exists in the market, and one of the reasons that the coalition came together, is that we're finding that a lot of the traditional automotive manufacturers are not really pushing electric vehicles because it's a challenge for them to make this transition, that they have to compete against themselves and their own product lines. And so, there's somewhat of a disincentive on their end to get people to go electric. And, Tesla doesn't have to do that because they only sell electric vehicles. So that can be a challenge.
If I may, I think GM is also part of, I think they're going to be fully electric by 2025. So GM is also
2035.
Yeah, no, things are definitely changing. I mean, I saw a dramatic change when the Biden administration came in.
But to the point of dealerships, I don't know what the percentage of profit is that a dealer makes in maintaining the cars that it sells and providing service for the cars that it sells. But when all of a sudden you have an electric car that requires practically no maintenance, it eliminates that piece of revenue from that dealer. So you can kind of see why he's competing with himself when he's asked to sell an electric car that isn't going to provide him with any revenue from a maintenance standpoint. And we are going to see this across the board as we shift to electric on every level. There are going to be jobs that will be lost as a result of this, and there will be other jobs that will be found because of this. So, yeah.
Yes.
Just like renewable energy, same dilemma there.
Yeah.
Certain jobs are going to be lost and others are going to be gained. And
exactly. And the other point that I wanted to make is that, like so many other renewable situations, the upfront cost is often greater, but the long-term savings is also greater. And consequently, what you save over the long term in many, many cases makes up for, in large part, what you spent in the first place.
Well, I'm looking at the time and I see that it's 5:15. If there are no other questions, which I don't see any others in the Q&A, then I'll turn it to Lauren to just give us a farewell, few thoughts.
Sure. So thank you so much to Drive Electric Long Island and to our panel of EV drivers. I think that this webinar was a great addition to our educational series on energy sustainability. Like I mentioned earlier, all of our webinars that we do, and they're not just focused on transportation. We have webinars on community choice aggregation, on solar. They're all posted on the energizeeh.org site for anybody who wants to rewatch them. Or share them with somebody who might have missed it, but you think that this information would be useful to them. Maybe they're on the fence with electric vehicles and this can help them finally take the plunge. You know, the town is very committed to energy sustainability, to renewable energy, and you know, we're very much looking forward to continuing to electrify our fleet and to help the community electrify its vehicles. Thank you all so much.
And I'd like to just thank again the town of East Hampton for having us and for all the efforts that you've been doing. You're really exemplary across Long Island.
Thank you.
Rosemary. And thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
You were great.
Thanks, everyone.
See you out on the road.
Right.
See you at the charging